My name is Thomas Ashton. For the past 11 years, I've been a bus driver for Yavapai County Transit. It's not glamorous work, not by a long shot, but it's steady. Or it used to be. For the majority of that time, I was assigned to Route 17, a long, desolate stretch that snakes its way through the emptiest parts of rural Arizona. Some folks might call it the graveyard shift of bus routes, and they wouldn't be far wrong. But I never minded the solitude. In fact, I preferred it. The quiet hum of the engine, the endless ribbon of asphalt unfurling under the vast, star-dusted sky, there was a certain peace to it. A peace I now realize was a fragile illusion, shattered by events I still struggle to comprehend. If I sound formal, it's because I need to be. I need to lay this out, piece by piece, exactly as it happened. Otherwise, I might lose what's left of my mind. Route 17 was my domain, particularly the late night and early morning runs. My bus, old number 47, was a familiar beast, a lumbering diesel relic, with cracked vinyl seats that smelled faintly of dust, sun-baked plastic, and the ghosts of 1,000 tired journeys. The air conditioning was temperamental, usually surrendering to the oppressive Arizona heat sometime after midnight. Why? Leaving me to rely on the dry desert wind, whistling through the open driver's window. The landscape out there is stark, beautiful in its own harsh way. Towering saguaros stand like silent sentinels, their arms outstretched against horizons that bleed from fiery orange to deep indigo. Distant mesas, flat-topped and ancient, brood under the moonlight. It's a land that feels older than time, a place where the silence can be so profound it rings in your ears. My typical shift began when the world was winding down. I'd pick up the late workers from the processing plant on the edge of town, a few quiet souls, heading home to isolated ranchitos. Why? And the occasional insomniac, just looking for a ride to nowhere in particular. The first few hours were always the same. The rhythmic thump of tires on uneven pavement, the hiss of the hydraulic doors, the soft murmur of passengers, if any. Discovered why. I knew the route like the back of my hand, every dip in the road, every faded billboard, every lonely. Why? Unlit stop where sometimes a passenger would materialize from the darkness, and sometimes nothing but the wind would greet me. The Ocotillo Bend stop, mile marker 73. The turn-off for Black Canyon Road. These were just points on a map, insignificant blips in the vast emptiness, or so I thought. The change began subtly, almost imperceptibly. It was a Tuesday, I think, or maybe a Wednesday. The days blur together when you live by the rhythm of the road. Tucked into my usual bundle of route, updates and safety bulletins at the depot was a single, crisp sheet of paper. It was typed. No letterhead, no signature, just a list. It was titled, Operational Clarifications. Route 17 effective immediately. I scanned it with mild curiosity, expecting some new detour or reminder about fare collection. What I read made me frown. Rule 1. Between the hours of 2:00 a.m. and 4:00 a.m., should you observe an individual waiting at the Ocotillo Bend stop, mile marker 68, you are not to stop. Do not make eye contact. Maintain your current speed and proceed as if the stop is unoccupied. This is a non-negotiable directive. Rule 2. if the vehicle's radio emits uninterrupted static for a period exceeding 3 and 13 minutes after passing mile marker 73, the unit must be powered down immediately. Do not attempt to reactivate the radio for the remainder of the designated route. Rule 3. Under no circumstances are non-scheduled pickups. Company policy strictly prohibits accommodating hitchhikers. On Route 17, this policy is to be considered absolute. I snorted, a small laugh escaping me. It had to be a prank. Some of the younger mechanics at the depot had a strange sense of humor. Operational clarifications, indeed. Still, something about the stark, impersonal language of the note felt off. I glanced around the deserted break room, but it was just me and the flickering fluorescent lights. I crumpled the note, intending to toss it, but then, for reasons I couldn't explain, I smoothed out and tucked it into my shirt pocket. That night, the desert air was unusually still, the heat clinging even as the moon climbed high. The first few hours were uneventful. I dropped off Mrs. Henderson at her small trailer near the old mine. Then a couple of quiet guys who worked the late shift at the plastics factory. The bus was empty. Just the hum of the engine and the vast, silent darkness outside my windows. As I approached mile marker 68, the Ocotillo Bend stopped. A flicker of movement at the edge of my headlights caught my eye. My heart gave an odd little jump. There, standing by the faded, bullet-riddled sign was a figure. Tall, indistinct, cloaked in shadow. The time on my dashboard clock read 2:37 a.m. Rule 1. The words flashed in my mind unbidden. My foot instinctively moved towards the brake. It was my job to stop for passengers. But a cold wave washed over me, a primal reluctance that had nothing to do with company policy or prank notes. The figure didn't wave, didn't move. It just stood there, a dark shape against the darker desert. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, and I drove on. In the rearview mirror, the figure remained, unmoving, until the darkness swallowed it. I told myself it was just someone waiting for a different ride. Someone who hadn't signaled. But the explanation felt hollow. Later, well past mile marker 73, the old radio, which had been playing a crackly country station, suddenly dissolved into a harsh, grating static. It wasn't the usual interference. This was loud, aggressive, filling the cabin of the bus with an almost physical pressure. I glanced at my watch. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. The static clawed at my ears. Rule 2. My hand shot out and slammed the power button. Silence, abrupt and heavy, descended. The only sound now was my own breathing, a little too quick, and the distant whine of the tires. I didn't try to turn it back on. The rest of the shift passed in a state of uneasy quiet. I tried to rationalize it. The figure at Ocotillo Bend was probably nothing. The radio, old bus, faulty wiring. Plausible. But the unease lingered. A cold knot in my stomach. When I finally pulled into the depot as the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky, I was tired, jumpy, and more than a little spooked. I clocked out, eager to get home, to wash the desert dust and the strange night off me. Discovered why. As I walked towards my car, I saw another piece of paper, identical to the first, tucked under my windshield wiper. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. With trembling hands, I unfolded it. More rules. Rule 4G. If any passenger attempts to pay their fare with currency minted prior to 1964, accept it without comment. Do not engage them in conversation beyond what is necessary. Their intended destination is not on your manifest. They will know when to alight. Rule 5. Should a passenger leave a personal item on the bus, you are to place it in the designated lost and found. However, if the item is a child's toy, and no child was on your manifest for that run, you are to leave it on the seat where it was found. Do not touch it again. It will be gone by morning. Rule 6. Why? The final passenger of your last run of the night will sometimes ask you a question before disembarking. The nature of this question may vary. Your answer is critical. We cannot offer guidance on this. Your continued employment may depend on your discretion. I stared at the paper, the typed words, seeming to writhe in the dim morning light. Continued employment. Discretion. This was no longer about strange company policies. A chill deeper than the pre-dawn air settled into my bones. Something was terribly wrong on Route 17, and I was right in the middle of it. The sun was a malevolent eye in the pale desert sky by the time I got back to my small apartment on the outskirts of Prescott. Sleep was a distant, mocking luxury. The second list of rules felt like a brand seared into my mind. Discovered why. I spread both sheets of paper on my worn kitchen table, the cheap fluorescent light casting harsh shadows, making the typed letters seem to squirm. Rule 4, 1964 currency. Rule 5 Chi, a child's toy. Rule 6 Chew. The final passenger. Your answer is critical. My first instinct was to call dispatch, to demand an explanation. But what would I say? That I was receiving cryptic, threatening notes about ghost passengers and haunted toys. We soon discovered why. They'd think I'd finally cracked under the desert heat and the lonely hours. Or worse, they'd know. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The impersonal, almost bureaucratic tone of the rules suggested an established, albeit insane, protocol. This wasn't a prank, it was a system, and I was now a cog in its terrifying machinery. I spent the day in a haze of anxiety and exhaustion, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren. We soon discovered why. I tried to tell myself it was stress, lack of sleep. But the image of that unmoving figure at Ocotillo Bend, the oppressive silence after the radio died, the sheer impossibility of someone placing that second note on my car in the depot, it all coalesced into a knot of cold dread. I had to go back. I had to drive Route 17, partly because I needed the job, the paycheck that barely kept me afloat. But there was another, darker reason, a morbid, undeniable compulsion to see what would happen next. To understand, even if understanding meant staring into an abyss. That evening, as I prepared for my shift, the air felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. The familiar routine of checking the bus tires, light fluids, felt alien, imbued with a new, sinister significance. Old number 47 seemed to watch me with its blank, circular headlights, its diesel heart pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat. The first few hours were deceptively normal. A handful of passengers, the usual quiet exchanges. I found myself scrutinizing every coin handed to me, every shadow in the corners of the bus. Then, around 1:30 a.m., an elderly woman boarded at a dimly lit stop just past a cluster of abandoned homesteads. She was frail. Discovered why. Her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes clouded with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Resignation, perhaps, or a profound weariness. She fumbled in a worn coin purse and then held out her hand. Resting in her palm were 3 silver quarters, their edges smooth with age. I recognized the distinct gleam of pre-1964 silver. Rule 4G: if any passenger attempts to pay their fare with currency minted prior to 1964, accept it without comment. Do not engage them in conversation beyond what is necessary. Their intended destination is not on your manifest. They will know when to alight. My breath hitched. I took the coins, their coldness seeping into my skin. Thank you, I managed, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant, and moved to a seat near the back. Settling by a window and staring out into the impenetrable darkness. I didn't ask for her destination. The rule was clear. I drove on, the silence in the bus thick with unspoken questions. Several stops passed. She made no move to get off. Then, we soon discovered why. In a stretch of road miles from any designated stop, with nothing but saguaros and scrubland on either side, she simply stood up. The bus was still moving. She walked to the rear door, and it hissed open with a side of hydraulics I hadn't activated. She stepped out into the night, and the door closed behind her. I didn't see her go. I only saw, in my rearview mirror, the empty stretch of road where she had been. There was no sign of her, no flicker of movement. Just the desert, swallowing everything. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I felt a tremor run through me. This wasn't just strange, it was impossible. Later, after dropping off my last scheduled passenger, I was doing my usual sweep of the empty bus before heading back to the depot. Tucked into the crevice of a seat near the middle, almost hidden in shadow, was a small wooden doll. It was crudely carved, its painted smile chipped, one button eye missing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked my manifest again, my hand shaking. No children. Not a single one on this run. Rule 5. We soon discovered why. Should a passenger leave a personal item on the bus if the item is a child's toy? Why? And no child was on your manifest for that run. You are to leave it on the seat where it was found. Do not touch it again. It will be gone by morning. The urge to pick it up, to examine it, to throw it out the window, was overwhelming. It felt like a test, a dare. But the memory of the old woman and the silver coins, the chilling certainty of these rules, held me back. I backed away from the seat, my gaze fixed on the doll. Its one good eye seemed to follow me. I left it there, a silent, malevolent passenger in the empty bus. The drive back to the depot was the longest of my life. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every sound was magnified. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the doll move, or, worse, to see something else sitting there with it. Why? When I finally parked number 47 in its designated spot, I practically fled the vehicle, not even daring a final look at that seat. I couldn't sleep that night, or rather, the slivers of sleep I managed were filled with disjointed, terrifying images. faceless figures waiting by desolate roads, coins that felt like ice, and the vacant stare of a one-eyed doll. The next morning, why, fueled by a desperate need to know, I arrived at the depot early, before the mechanics and other drivers. My heart pounded as I approached 47. I climbed the steps, my breath catching in my throat. I walked slowly down the aisle, my eyes fixed on the seat where I'd left the doll. It was empty. The wooden doll was gone. Not a trace of it remained. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I had to grip the back of a seat to steady myself. It was real. All of it. The rules, the strange occurrences, the chilling implications, they were all horrifyingly real. I felt a profound sense of being trapped, of being watched by forces I couldn't comprehend. Route 17 wasn't just a bus route anymore. It was something else. A conduit for I didn't know what. And I was its unwilling ferryman. As I stood there, the silence of the bus pressing in on me, I remembered the final, most ominous rule. Rule 6. We soon discovered why the final passenger of your last run of the night will sometimes ask you a question. Your answer is critical. We cannot offer guidance on this. What kind of question? And what, in God's name, would be the right answer? The thought filled me with a fresh wave of terror. The stakes were clearly rising, and I had a sickening feeling that the true horror of Route 17 was only just beginning to reveal itself. The following days, or rather nights, were a blur of mounting terror and a gnawing, insidious paranoia. Each shift on Route 17 felt like a descent deeper into a personalized hell, meticulously crafted by some unseen, malevolent intelligence. The rules were no longer just words on paper. They were the bards of my cage, each one a cold, unyielding reminder of my captivity. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a temporary holding cell before the next inevitable journey into the dark heart of rural Arizona. My sleep offered no escape, only a gallery of grotesque images, the vacant stare of the wooden doll, the silent, silver coin-bearing woman vanishing into the desert, and the ever-present, unmoving figure at Ocotillo Bend. I tried to find patterns, some semblance of logic in the madness. I meticulously documented every strange occurrence in a cheap spiral notebook, times, locations, the specific rule that seemed to apply. The Ocotillo Bend figure was a constant between 2000 AM and 4000 AM. Always there. Always still. I never stopped, never looked. But the knowledge of its presence was a weight on my soul. The radio static after mile marker 73 became a dreaded certainty. I'd preemptively switch it off now. The silence somehow preferable to that aggressive, ear-splitting noise. Passengers paying with pre-1964 silver coins appeared sporadically, perhaps once or twice a week. They were always solitary, always quiet, their eyes holding a profound sadness, a weariness that seemed ancient. They never spoke beyond a mumbled, "Thank you," if that, and always disembarked where there was no stop, the doors hissing open as if by their will alone, before they melted into the darkness. I stopped questioning it. I just drove. The most unsettling rule, however, was Rule 5 concerning children's toys. Twice more that week, I found items left behind on seats where no child had been. Once, a small, brightly colored spinning top. Another time, a single, slightly deflated red balloon. Each time, my manifest confirmed no children. Each time, I left the item where it lay, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And each time, by the next morning, it was gone. The implication was horrifying, that something unseen, unheard, was boarding my bus, leaving these tokens, these reminders. One particularly sweltering night, as the cicadas buzzed their relentless song from the unseen desert, we soon discovered why. I found another note tucked under my depot locker handle. The paper was the same, the typing identical. My hands trembled as I read it. Rule 7. If you observe a passenger whose reflection in the windows or mirrors does not match their physical appearance, G. Younger, older, distorted, or entirely different, do not acknowledge this discrepancy. Do not stare. Complete your route as normal. They are merely transitioning. Rule 8. The entity sometimes referred to as the road keeper may manifest as a series of rapidly changing traffic lights at an unsignaled intersection, or as roadkill that appears to move. Do not stop for either. Maintain speed. It is testing your resolve. Rule 9. If all the interior lights of the bus extinguish simultaneously, and a cold spot develops near the driver's seat, begin to hum a simple, non-religious tune. Continue humming until the lights return or the cold dissipates. Do not speak. Do not pray. It dislikes direct appeals. Transitioning. The road keeper. My mind reeled. Each new rule peeled back another layer of perceived reality, revealing something more monstrous beneath. The sheer banality of the typed instructions, the calm, procedural language, made it all the more terrifying. This wasn't chaos. This was an ordered system of horror. The following night, Rule 7 came into play. A young man boarded at the desolate junction near the old copper mine, a place where the only structures were crumbling shacks and rusted machinery. He looked ordinary enough: jeans, a faded shirt, tired eyes. He paid with modern currency, sat near the front, and stared out the window. As I glanced in the large rearview mirror to check the aisle, my blood turned to ice. Reflected in the glass, we soon discovered why. Sitting in the young man's seat was an ancient, desiccated figure, its skin like parchment stretched over a skull, its eyes hollow sockets. I snapped my gaze back to the young man himself. He was still there, unchanged. I looked back at the mirror. The corpse-like figure stared back. They are merely transitioning. My breath caught in my throat. Discovered why. I forced myself to look ahead, to focus on the white lines of the road, my hands gripping, the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I could feel the passenger's presence, the young man, and yet in the mirror, that other thing watched. I drove, for what felt like an eternity, the duality of that passenger a screaming torment in my peripheral vision. When he finally signaled his stop, a patch of barren desert miles from anywhere, and disembarked, I didn't dare look in the mirror until he was long gone. When I finally did, the seat was empty. Rule 9 manifested 2 nights later. I was on a particularly dark stretch of Route 17, the moon hidden behind a thick veil of clouds. Suddenly, with a soft pop, all the interior lights of the bus blinked out, plunging the cabin into near total darkness. Simultaneously, a chilling cold, far more intense than the desert night, enveloped me, prickling my skin. It felt like an open freezer door, but infused with a palpable sense of presence. Begin to hum a simple, non-religious tune. Panic clawed at me, but the rule was seared into my brain. I started to hum, my voice shaky at first, then steadier. I chose Twinkle, Little Star, the first innocuous melody that came to mind. The cold intensified, pressing in on me. I hummed, louder, my eyes darting around the darkened bus, expecting something. The humming felt absurd, a childish ward against an unimaginable darkness. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, the lights flickered back on one by one. The cold receded, leaving behind a lingering sense of violation. I was unraveling. The lack of sleep, the constant fear, the sheer impossibility of it all, was grinding me down. Why? I started talking to myself on the long, empty stretches of road, questioning my sanity, questioning everything. I considered quitting, just walking away. But the rules, especially Rule 6, your answer is critical. We cannot offer guidance on this. Your continued employment may depend on your discretion, held me hostage. Why? What if walking away was the wrong answer? What if there were consequences beyond losing a job? The notes always found me. Then came the night I'd been dreading. The night Rule 6 became a terrifying reality. It was the end of my last run. A little after 4:30 a.m., I had only one passenger left, a woman I'd picked up near the Whispering Sands trailer park. She was middle-aged, plainly dressed, and had said nothing the entire ride, simply staring out at the passing darkness. As I pulled up to her stop, the last stop, a lonely crossroads with a single, flickering street lamp, she rose. She walked to the front of the bus, paused at the door, and then turned to me. Her eyes, in the dim light, seemed to hold an unnatural stillness. "Driver," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion, "when the road ends, and the journey is done, what truly remains of the traveler?" My mind went blank. This was it. The question. Your answer is critical. What did it mean? Was it a philosophical query? A riddle? A trap? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Her eyes bored into me, patient, expectant. My heart hammered. What was the right answer? What could I possibly say to this gatekeeper of my sanity? Perhaps my life. The desert night outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The woman's question hung in the oppressive silence of the bus, heavier than the desert heat that still radiated from the engine. When the road ends, and the journey is done, what truly remains of the traveler? Her eyes, dark and unblinking, held mine. This was the crucible. The moment Rule 6 had warned of, where an answer was critical and no guidance was offered. My mind, already frayed from weeks of sleeplessness and terror, raced through 1,000 frantic possibilities. A wrong answer, I didn't want to contemplate the consequences. The rules were absolute. I took a slow breath, the air tasting of dust and ozone. My voice, when it finally came, was raspy, barely a whisper. Yet it seemed to fill the small space. What remains? I began, choosing my words with the care of a man diffusing a bomb. The stories whispered on the wind, the echoes in the silence of the empty seats. and the dust that settles on the road. Waiting for the next journey. Perhaps the traveler becomes a part of the road itself. A memory imprinted on the landscape they traversed. It was the best I could do. We soon discovered why. A desperate attempt to weave together the ephemeral nature of the passengers I'd encountered with the enduring, malevolent presence of Route 17. For a long moment, the woman simply stared, her expression unreadable. Then, a flicker. So faint I almost missed it. Was it the corner of her mouth twitching upwards? Or just a trick of the flickering street lamp outside? "Indeed, driver," she said, her voice still flat, but with an undertone I couldn't decipher. Not approval, not disapproval. Acceptance, perhaps. The echoes. And the dust. She turned then, without another word, and the hydraulic doors hissed open, though I hadn't touched the control. She stepped out into the desolate crossroads, and the doors sighed shut behind her. I watched in the mirror as she walked, not towards any discernible path, but directly into the inky blackness between the widely spaced, skeletal mesquite trees, disappearing as completely as if the desert itself had inhaled her. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, my heart gradually slowing its frantic pace. Had I answered correctly? There was no confirmation. No new note appearing on my dashboard. Just the profound ringing silence of the Arizona night. Eventually, the need to complete my shift, to return to the depot, overrode the paralysis. I put the bus in gear and drove, the events of the night replaying in my mind like a stuck record. The next few shifts were strangely quiet. The figure at Ocotillo Bend was still there, a silent sentinel. The radio still erupted into static past mile, marker 73. I encountered a passenger with pre-1964 silver, and another day found a small, tarnished tin soldier on a seat, which vanished by morning. The rules remained, the phenomena persisted, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, or perhaps in me. The raw, jagged edge of terror had been blunted, replaced by a kind of wary, resigned dread. I had faced the question, and I was still here. Then, about a week after my encounter with the woman at the crossroads, I found a new note. It wasn't on my windshield, nor in my locker. It was placed neatly on the driver's seat of old number 47 when I arrived for my shift, as if it had materialized there. The paper was the same, the typing identical. Rule 10: you are no longer just a driver, Thomas Ashton. You are a custodian. The echoes and the dust are now part of your charge. You will continue to observe the established protocols. Rule 11: kill. The road has many travelers and many stories. Some are for you to witness. Some are for you to facilitate. Do not interfere beyond the parameters of the rules. Your discretion is noted and, for now, valued. Rule 112. There is no final stop on Route 17 for its custodian. The journey is continuous. A cold wave washed over me, colder than any phantom chill the bus had conjured before. Custodian. The word echoed in my mind. No longer just a driver. I was part of it now, inextricably linked to the route, to the rules, to the things that traveled it. The finality of Rule 12 was like a death sentence delivered in calm, bureaucratic prose. The journey is continuous. My initial, formal recounting of these events, the one I began, with the simple statement of my name and occupation, feels like a lifetime ago. That man, Thomas Ashton, who preferred the solitude of the night shift, who found peace in the hum of the engine, is a ghost himself now. The peace I once knew was indeed a fragile illusion. The reality is this: I still drive Route 17. I have no other choice. The notes stopped appearing after Rule 12. But the rules themselves are burned into my consciousness. I see the figure at Ocotillo Bend, and I drive on, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. I accept the old silver. I leave the toys untouched. I witness reflections that don't match, and I hum when the lights go out. I am the custodian of these fleeting, terrifying moments. Why? The ferryman on a river of asphalt that flows through a landscape of waking nightmares. Sometimes, late at night, when the bus is empty save for the sigh of the wind, through a loose window seal, I hear them. The echoes. Faint whispers. Fragments of conversations from passengers long gone. The rustle of clothing. A child's soft laugh that turns into a sob. And the dust is always there. It settles on the dashboard, on the empty seats, a fine, almost imperceptible layer. Why? I clean the bus at the end of every shift. But the dust always returns, a constant reminder of the countless journeys, the countless travelers. I don't know what entity or entities dictate these rules, or what purpose 17 truly serves. Is it a boundary, a feeding ground, a place where realities bleed into one another? I suspect I will never know. My role is not to understand, but to observe, to facilitate, and to drive. Why? The formal tone I've tried to maintain in recounting this is my last bastion of sanity, an attempt to impose order on the inexplicable. But sometimes, when I look in the rearview mirror, I see my own eyes staring back. And they look older, warier, like the eyes of the woman who paid in silver. And I wonder, when my own road finally, truly ends, what story will I become? What echo will I leave behind in the perpetual twilight of Route 17? Will I too become just dust, settling on an empty seat, waiting for the next custodian to drive on into the unending, terrible night? The journey, as Rule 12 stated, is continuous, and I, Thomas Ashton, am its driver, forever.